Why? Lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness spring up trouble him. And what happens? Thereby many be defiled. So you fail to understand the grace of God, that He is still in control, He is still good, His grace is more than sufficient. But there's a little root that springs up someplace deep down inside, and that root is called bitterness. And it grows. And it makes you bitter. And you make other people bitter. That's what happens. I've been through it. Listen, I just didn't come here fresh this morning. I've been around a few years. I mean, I'm old. And I was in the same church 30-some years preaching the same crowd. So if I didn't learn anything, I sure disturbed them. And a lot of people did not like what I had to say. Oh, everybody said, "Preacher, that's the greatest sermon I have ever heard." You're not telling the truth. I had a lady come to Lewis one day. By the way, God put me in a wonderful place. I walked into the head of the Department of Religion at Bob Jones University back in 1960, I guess, and talked to Dr. Gilbert Stenholm. And Dr. Gilbert Stenholm said, "What do you want to do? Are you going to be a teacher?" I said, "No way I'll ever be a teacher. I just finished a master's degree. No way I will ever be a teacher." He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to be a country preacher." Well, they said, "There's hope for you then." So he sent me to Lewis, Delaware, and I got there. And you know what a wonderful ministry? I mean, people came there to see me. Can you believe that? They didn't come from the beach necessarily, they came to see me. And I'm on a Sunday morning, I'd come in and have a full house of people. Now, it's kind of sparse in the winter, but I'm in the summer, full house of people. One lady came there one day, and she said, "I'm from Virginia." She said, "You're a great preacher." Yeah, I know. Everybody's told me that. "What can I do for you, lady?" She said, "Why don't you move this church to Virginia?" I said, "Well, I've got it made here. Why would I go to Virginia?" "No, I'm going to stay here." You know, that dear lady was so impressed by that response, she sent $1,000 the next week to the church. So some things come to pass and not all stress. But there it was. They just lost their reason. Why kill David? Why take such an extreme action? They weren't thinking. They weren't looking at it biblically. What else? Well, as some of you may know, if you skip down a little bit in our text this morning to chapter 30, verse number 9, "So David went, he and the 600 men that were with him, and came to the brook Bosor, where those that were left behind stayed." So David said, we've got to do something about this situation. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to find our families and wives. We're going to go get them. We're going to take action. You join me and we'll be victors. So David sets off. But there were 200 folks that were so depleted by their stressful situation, they said, "David, even though it means going after my family and my wife and my goods physically, I can't do it." Can you believe that? Can you believe that? 200 of them sat down by the brook Bosor, and they said, "We can go no farther." Now, I know they'd come 3 days from the enemy's camp. They had a stressful situation at Ziklag. I understand that. But listen, I also know that little bitterness that springs up in you, that distress that you carry, and soon permeates others. It destroys you physically, doesn't it? You don't want to do what you should do. It's just hard. I mean, you're a Sunday school teacher and you should study that lesson. You put it off. You just don't have the energy to do it. Too many things happening, preacher. I've heard it all the time. Preacher, I'd like to do this, but you know, yeah, I know. Physically, you're depleted. You don't have the energy. You let that bitterness take over your life, that distress. You don't handle it biblically. And that's what happened. So there they sat. Chapter 30, verse 9, they sat there. So that's the helpers that David had, 600 of them. That's what happened to them. Now what happened to David? Let's find out what happened to David. Well, go down to verse 6. Chapter 30, verse 6. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of the people was grieved, every man for his sons, for his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord. You'd have to go back to chapter 26 to find out David's last real contact with the Lord. Now there's stress. There are problems, serious, serious problems. David has lost his family, his home. All of the people that rallied around him, they're gone. Ever devastation all about him. And David said, we've got to handle this biblically. David, the great psalmist, said, I'm going to get encouragement, but it's not going to come from the Philistines. It's going to come from the Lord. It's going to come from the Lord. I read a song one day that I've sung probably 100 times. Not personally, I don't sing, but I've sung it someplace. I was so impressed by the song, I looked it up one day and I found this. There was a little preacher in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. His name was Elijah Hoffman, just a little pastor, country pastor. And this dear pastor had a great heart for the people in his congregation. There was one dear lady there that was prone to very serious depression. So as often as he could, he'd stop by and try to encourage her. Have prayer with her, read some scripture, and he did this over and over and over again. One day the call came, Pastor, she needs you today. She's really depressed, really discouraged. Will you go? And so he went, took his Bible, read the Bible, they had prayer together. And as he was leaving, he said, Sister, I just want to tell you, we must tell Jesus. And she said, Pastor, we must tell Jesus. So the song was written. I must tell Jesus all of my trials. I cannot bear these trials alone. In my distress, He kindly will help me. He ever loves and cares for His own. I must tell Jesus all of my troubles. He is a kind, compassionate friend. If I but ask Him, He will deliver. Make of my troubles quickly an end. I must tell Jesus. And so David handled the situation biblically. I must take my encouragement from the Lord. I must learn to allow the Lord be my guide and my deliverer, my helper in every time of my need. Oh, it's all right to have all kinds of friends. They sometimes can help us. But so oftentimes we skirt the real issue and we don't handle things biblically and we get discouraged and we don't think right. We lose physical energy. We mope and cry about it. But we forget I must tell Jesus. Thank God for the old-fashioned prayer meeting. I don't know what night you have it, but on Wednesday night. Because I can go to that prayer meeting carrying the burdens of life. All the burdens of life. And there's somebody who's going to say, we must tell Jesus. And there we tell Jesus. How does a godly person handle their distress? Well, David went to the Lord. David strengthened himself in the Lord. Hadn't thought much about the Lord, thought about the Philistines, thought about his troubles, thought about how to work them out. But now he goes, notice verse 7. And David said to Abiathar the priest, Elimelech's son, I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought hither the ephod to David. Now the ephod was a part of the priestly garments. It had to do with determining the very will